So there are a lot of data visualizations in the media. There's lots of information being shared on COVID every day, coming from news outlets, the CDC, places like Johns Hopkins. So we're all seeing a lot of different visualizations of COVID data every day, trends reporting things like cases, locations, deaths. And so data visualization refers to how that information is presented to us using charts and graphs and other kinds of visual aids. And it's really important to have those because they're a key element in communicating the risks and impact of the virus to the public and to policymakers. And so it's important that that information be communicated accurately. And when it is, that can help us understand what's going on with the virus, make sure citizens, leaders, and policymakers are informed, and ultimately help control the spread of the virus. So what we've been working on has to do with studying those data visualizations and understanding if when we look at them, are we seeing the same thing? So data visualization basically refers to how people process information like data, charts, and graphs. And we, based on what we know about human psychology and visual perception, we can figure out how to create visualizations that give people an accurate understanding of data. But basically, it turns out that some graphs are easier to understand and lead to more accurate perceptions of the data than others.
And so from a research perspective, what we did was we wanted to really understand things around the politicization of COVID data visualization. So unfortunately, a lot of the pandemic has been politicized. And specifically, we wanted to know whether one's political affiliations, how that influences their ability to make these more perceptual judgments around data visualization. So whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, or independent, how might that change how you, for example, perceive the differences in the heights of bars or the slope of a line graph? And it's not just about that perception, but it's also about how one would describe the slope of that line as sharply increasing or more gently increasing. So what we did was we actually ran a large-scale online survey with over 1,000 people across the political spectrum and showed them data visualizations and had them make these basic perceptual judgments and describe that data as well, including the line charts with cases and deaths and bar charts and something called tree maps. And to see, is there a difference between how specifically Republicans and Democrats would make those perceptual judgments? Then what we did was we had another group of people look at the exact same data, but this time, instead of labeled COVID, it was labeled flu and influenza. And to see whether as a control, something that isn't politicized, like flu and influenza, whether we'd see the same pattern or a different pattern of results. And what we really want to understand is how somebody's, whether it's their kind of political perspectives or other factors, could influence how they interpret different types of data visualizations.
So I think one thing that I find interesting about this research is that there is a lot of research out there on data visualization, and typically in most studies, graphs are shown and people make perceptual judgments. And there's been less research on, well, what is that data actually about and how does that affect the judgments? Right. So a lot of the studies have sort of used generic data as opposed to things that are politicized, like COVID, for example. So I think a potentially, exciting thing about this research is contributing to the data visualization work that's out there by looking at what happens when that data is about different things. Does that actually impact our judgments, and do we see the same thing in those cases?
So this is really what excites me the most is when somebody comes in and is making perceptual judgments of data visualizations, they try to interpret that. What sort of baggage do they have or perspectives that could shape one way or the other about how they not only interpret the data perceptually, but how they make judgments and ultimately decisions on it? Do we see what we want to see? And how deep does that go from a perceptual standpoint? What I would love to do next is to extend this research by including other types of data visualizations, and also to look at how different design elements could change somebody's ability to accurately perceive different elements of a data visualization. We use very simple black and white bar charts and line graphs, but if we start introducing more visual elements, things that are more interactive, how does that potentially influence somebody's ability to make these judgments? And what are other factors besides just somebody's political leanings in terms of how they would interpret that?